He never picked up a weapon. He never raised a fist in anger. Yet he changed the laws of a nation, challenged the conscience of the world, and became a symbol of moral courage. So powerful that even decades after his death, his voice still echoes. Martin Luther King Jr. believed in one radical idea, that peace, not violence, was the most powerful weapon in the fight for justice. And with that belief, he helped rewrite history. Born in 1929, in a segregated Atlanta, Martin Luther King Jr. came into a world defined by lines. Lines on buses, lines in schools, lines in restrooms, restaurants, and neighborhoods. America had ridden inequality into its infrastructure, and Black Americans were expected to know their place. But King was raised to question that place. Not with rage, but with reason. His father, a Baptist preacher, taught him that dignity and equality were not privileges to be earned, but rights that no law could deny. King excelled as a student. By age 15, he was already in college. But it was during his studies in theology and philosophy that he encountered the ideas that would shape his destiny. He studied Gandhi. He read thought. He reflected on Jesus. From these voices, he formed a new kind of leadership, grounded in faith, reason, and nonviolence. In 1954, King became pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He was just 25 years old. No one expected that within a year, he would be at the center of a national movement. But history moves quickly. In December 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus. Her arrest sparked outrage and an opportunity. Black citizens, tired of decades of humiliation, organized a bus boycott. They needed a leader, educated, respected, principled, and unafraid. They turned to the young pastor. King stepped up. He gave speeches that lit fires in the hearts of people who had been told to stay silent. But he also demanded discipline. There would be no violence. No retaliation, only dignity, prayer, and persistence. The Montgomery Bus Boycott lasted over a year. Black citizens walked miles to work, faced threats, arrests, and harassment, and kept going. In the end, they won. The buses were A local protest had become a national triumph, and Martin Luther King Jr. was no longer just a preacher. He was the voice of a movement. Over the next decade, King traveled constantly, marching, organizing, speaking to packed churches and empty streets. He was jailed, attacked, and constantly threatened, but he never changed his message. Nonviolence is not weakness. It is strength, rooted in love and designed to shame injustice into retreat. In Birmingham, King led a campaign to confront the city's brutal segregation laws. When children joined the marches, police unleashed dogs and fire hoses. The images shocked the world, but King knew that peaceful resistance, met by brutal violence, would expose the moral failure of the system and move public opinion. It worked. National media could no longer ignore the injustice. People began to listen. In 1963, King helped organize the March on Washington, peaceful demonstration for jobs and civil rights. Over 250,000 people gathered near the Lincoln Memorial, unified by hope and purpose. It was there that King delivered his most famous words, "I have a dream." That dream was not a fantasy. It was a vision of a country where character mattered more than skin, where justice rolled down like water, and where all people could sit together at the table of brotherhood. His speech echoed across the world, but it was not the end. The struggle continued. In 1965, King led marches in Selma, Alabama, to demand voting rights. The peaceful marchers were met with brutal force on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, an event now known as Bloody Sunday. King returned days later, this time with thousands of supporters, and the movement would not be stopped. That year, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. King's victories reshaped the nation, but they did not come without cost. As his influence grew, so did resistance. From white supremacists, even from critics within his own movement who demanded a more aggressive approach. But King remained committed to his method. For him, violence was not just immoral. It was ineffective. It didn't heal. It didn't unite. His goal wasn't just to win rights, but to win hearts. By the late 1960s, King began to expand his focus. He spoke out against poverty, against economic inequality, and against the Vietnam War. He believed that racism and materialism were connected, and that true justice required systemic change. Some supporters turned away, uncomfortable with this broader message, but King stood firm. In 1968, he traveled to Memphis, Tennessee, to support striking sanitation workers. These men, poorly paid and treated as invisible, carried signs that read, "I am a man." King saw in them the same dignity he had fought for in Montgomery, Birmingham, and Selma. He believed their fight was part of the same struggle. On the evening of April 3rd, King gave a speech that now feels almost prophetic. He spoke of threats to his life, of the road he had traveled, and then, with quiet power, he said, "I've been to the mountain top. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, will get to the promised land." The next day, he was assassinated. The bullet that ended his life could not stop his movement. It could not erase his words or silence the dream. If anything, it immortalized them. Today, Martin Luther King Jr. is honored with a national holiday, memorials, and speeches. But his legacy is more than memory. It is a method, a challenge. He proved that peace is not passive, that dignity is a form of defiance, that one person, armed only with truth and love, can force a nation to see itself clearly and demand better. King's dream is not finished. The work continues, but because of him, the path forward is clearer, not paved with hate or vengeance, but with courage, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that justice can be won without violence. He taught us that power doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a gun. Sometimes, power marches barefoot. Sometimes, it sits quietly in a jail cell. Sometimes, it dreams out loud and changes everything. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't just fight for civil rights. He redefined what power looks like. And in doing so, he showed the world that the greatest weapon we'll ever wield is peace.